The word cannibalism originates from the Island Carib after unearthed 17th century legends suggested that the eating of human flesh was part of their culture, although this has since been debated. Instances of human cannibalism have been documented all over the world. It's been practiced in countries like Great Britain, New Guinea, the Solomon Islands, Fiji, the Amazon Basin, the Congo, and amongst Maoris in New Zealand. But the original cannibals weren't actually Homo sapiens. Archaeological evidence suggests that it was practiced by other early hominins, with evidence of defleshed bones dating back 600,000 years, and excavations of a Neanderthal site in Moula-Guercy have uncovered the parts of 6 Neanderthals dating back 100,000 years and showing evidence of human cannibalism. The palaeontologists reported that it looked like the bones had been broken in such a way that they could extract marrow and brains, and tool marks showed the cutting of flesh from the bones of the thigh. Further evidence was found in a cave in El Sidron in Spain, where 12 Neanderthals had been dismembered and eaten by others more than 50,000 years ago. All this means as long as there have been human species, there has been cannibalism. And cannibalism among more modern humans, aka us, can be traced back through many cultures and traditions and wasn't always as barbaric as you may think. Our modern-day interpretations can actually be traced back to colonial times and the stories told by a truly unreliable narrator, Christopher Columbus. Long before our modern interpretation, and long before it even had a name, cannibalism was part of many societies and, depending on location, could either be seen as savage or ritualistic. In ancient Greece, opinions of cannibalism tend more towards the savage side, as several stories in Greek mythology involving human cannibalism are used as lessons in morality. Ancient Greek historian Herodotus also brought us knowledge of Scythia, a region of Eurasia that the Greeks saw as strong, nomadic warrior people split into tribes or groups. One of these groups that Herodotus discusses was named the Adraphagi. According to him, the Adraphagi were a savage race that engaged in cannibalism. This is later backed up by Roman author Pliny the Elder, who described them as drinking out of human skulls and using scalps as napkins. Another of these groups, the Isidones, according to Herodotus and later archaeological research, potentially engaged in the act of funeralistic cannibalism, where after death, the body was dismembered for hygiene reasons and the flesh consumed. Although these depictions now fit the more traditional Western narrative, the same cannot be said of findings in other parts of the world. For instance, in ancient Egypt, Pharaoh Yunus was buried along with a poem that seemingly exalted the use of cannibalism, suggesting the king himself took part in it, with lines such as, "King Yunus is one who eats men and lives on gods," and "The kettles are replenished for him with the legs of their women," among many other references. Among other works and etchings on tombs and temples, historians have tentatively suggested that cannibalism was part of certain human sacrifice rituals. According to Roman historian Cassius Dio, he personally witnessed the sacrifice and eating of 2 Roman officers with an oath sworn over their entrails. Across ancient Mesopotamia, it's also speculated that cannibals were part of the many sacrificial rituals that took place, although there has been no scholarly consensus on this matter. If you want to learn more about human sacrifice in Mesoamerica, don't forget to check out our video, A Brief History of Human Sacrifice, the Aztecs, next. As we go forward in history, from ancient to post-1st century AD, we see more evidence of cannibalism emerging. Although already frowned upon in Western Europe, that didn't stop it from happening in certain circumstances. During the First Crusade at the Siege of Ma'ara in 1098, multiple reports suggest that the Crusaders ate the flesh of their Muslim victims as food in the city grew scarce. But as that doesn't fit the narrative of the Western savior, it's long since been covered up and not acknowledged in Western history, despite the evidence of chroniclers at the time. By the time of Christopher Columbus, the eating of flesh was a known phenomenon, but not one that had yet acquired a name. When Columbus traveled to the Caribbean islands as part of Spain's overseas expansion, he came across a group of native people called the Caribs, who it's likely did practice ritualistic, war-based cannibalism. However, Columbus turned this to his advantage, using it as a way to convince the Spaniards that the conquest of these people was necessary. In doing so, he first penned the term cannibal. This is because initially the Queen of Spain, Isabel, had decreed that although she wanted conquest of the islands, the indigenous people were not to be enslaved unless they were guilty of cannibalism. Columbus, seizing the opportunity for rampant colonization of course, immediately claimed that cannibalism was rampant in order to attack and justify the conquest. But European hypocrisy knows no bounds. For while they were overseas enslaving indigenous people and claiming their land for their own, they were also busy participating in medical cannibalism, the practice of mummia. Mumia first arose around the 12th century, and by the 15th, Europeans had really immersed themselves in the craze. Mumia was the art of stealing mummies from ancient Egyptian tombs in order to create medicine that Europeans believed cured a multitude of ailments and illnesses. Bodies would be broken into pieces and bones ground into powder, which would then be inhaled, drank, or eaten to cure maladies. In typical European fashion, the Europeans would react in shock, horror, and disgust at tales from the New World and the alleged cannibalism that took place there, all the while eating the mummified corpses of ancient Egyptians themselves. Of course, Egyptian mummies aren't super easy to come by, so soon these mummies were supplemented with simple grave robbing and the parts of recently executed criminals. Further examples of cannibalism persist throughout the next 500 years up to modern day. Whether it's for ritualistic, medicinal, or more nefarious purposes, cannibalism is something that has continued to rear its head. One of the most common times is during extreme famine or war, where people are forced to face a terrible choice: starve or eat the flesh of another to survive. Modern examples include during the siege of Leningrad in World War II and following a Uruguayan plane crash on an Argentinian glacier, where survivors resorted to eating the dead passengers in order to survive. As time has gone on, there is evidence of the practice dying out in all but the most extreme of circumstances. However, that's not to say it has vanished entirely. The Korowai tribe of Papua New Guinea was first made contact with in 1972 and are now known as one of the last known tribes to have practiced in cannibalism, who believed in eating the dead if they believed they had been inhabited by a demon or evil spirit. According to some members of the tribe itself, this practice still continues today. Yuck! Feeling hungry? Sink your teeth into a day in history by liking and subscribing to our channel.